Hi, everybody. Welcome to A Mighty Blaze. I'm Jenna Blum, one of the co-founders of The Blaze, and I am here today with a very special Friday Frontliner guest star, Lisa Barr, the woman on fire. I feel like Caesar Flickerman from the Hunger Games. I'm just like, isn't she amazing? Ha 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 ha! The woman on fire. So happy to have you here, Lisa. Hello.
Hi, Jenna. Finally, it's so great to be with you and just connect. And I know we've got a lot to talk about. And I just want to thank you for advising me for a little of this.
Absolutely. So everybody, it is gin o'clock here on The Blaze, or
Like
at
Jen
least
o'clock.
bourbon o'clock. Get your drink on. Come and join us. We're going to have a fun conversation today. And you need this because it's going to get so freaking hot in here. So get your drink on while I introduce The Blaze. So for those of you who are new to The Blaze, thank you for joining us. Today, we are a team of 35 creative professional volunteers dedicated to connecting writers and readers in the age of COVID, Delta, Omicron, Zemelda, like whatever thing comes next, and beyond. We are not going anywhere. We're so happy to give writers a platform to introduce their new work. If you like what you see here, please give us a like or a follow on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, on YouTube, on Goodreads, on LinkedIn. We are ubiquitous. And please consider signing up for our newsletter, which is www.amightyblaze.com. So you're kept abreast of all of the fantastic offerings that we have. And you never have FOMO ever again. No mo literary FOMO. Nobody likes that. And those of you who are return blazers, thank you. You bring the party. You bring the heat. We do not blaze without you. So welcome, everybody. As I said, hi, Anissa. Anissa brings like all the fire. Like literally, she is our like super fan viewer, and she lives in South Carolina. And when I leave Florida, where I am now, I am coming to your house, Anissa. And so I see you. I'm coming for you in a good way. So today we have Lisa Barr talking about Woman on Fire, which I am so excited to talk about. And we're going to dish about all the things. But first, I'm going to give Lisa her props in case you don't yet know who she is and worship at the altar of Lisa. So Lisa, you ready for me to read your bio?
Go have at it.
Okay, buckle up. You. Lisa Barr is the author of Woman on Fire, Boom, The Unbreakables, and the historical thriller Fugitive Colors, which won first prize at the Hollywood Film Festival Opus Magnum Discovery Award. In addition, Lisa has served as an editor for the Jerusalem Post, Today Chicago Woman, Moment Magazine, and editor-reporter, which those of you who've read Woman on Fire know, I think plays a big part, which I'd love to talk about, for the Chicago Sun-Times. Lisa has been featured on Good Morning America and The Today Show, and in breaking book news, Woman on Fire is now a Barnes & Noble pick, right? And Sharon Stone is set to produce and star in the film adaptation, which just happened like a few weeks ago, right? Like,
it's crazy.
So exciting. So that is like my Caesar Flickerman moment where I'm like, ha, it's so great. All right, I will stop doing that now. So, all right, no more Caesar until the end. So Lisa, thank you for being here. Tell us about Woman on Fire, please. Like, can you give us in your own words what the book is about?
Yes. So Woman on Fire is a gripping tale of a 24-year-old journalist who gets embroiled in a major international art scandal. And it's centered around a Nazi looted painting. And she's going to have to decide how far she's going to go to get that painting, to get the story. So it's sexy, it's historical, it's it's risky journalistic pursuits, and of course, strong, fiery women. And I loved writing this book.
I'm so glad to hear that. Do people ever tell you, by the way, that you sound like Demi Moore? Which
And when I was a little girl, and this was not, I used to get, I'm literally from third grade, you sound like Brenda Vaccaro. And so this was from when I was a little girl, I had this very low type of voice. And yes, I've gotten, different types of actresses' voices.
I love it. When I was in my teens in high school, I used to smoke. Like I started smoking so that I would sound like you. Real, like I was like, there was one weekend when I like smoked and got a cold, and I'm like, now I sound like I want to be, and now I'm back to my helium voice. I just like love your voice so good. Sorry. So that was actually not on my list of questions, but so can you tell us a little bit about like the origin story for Woman on Fire? Like where did it start? Did it start with art? Did it start with the Nazi appropriation of art, which of course I find fascinating?
So my first book, Fugitive Colors, my debut novel, it was about stolen art, but from the painter's perspective. So before I even put pen to paper, I researched for 4 years. And, my background is a journalist. So I had, 28 years in the field, and there was no stone left unturned. And, when you're writing about the Holocaust, you got to get it right. So
Mm-hmm.
through that experience, I became sort of a quasi like stolen art expert. And when I sort of took a break from that with my second book, which was more sexy women's fiction, but with this book, I decided to come back to my roots using my background as a journalist. And what really stimulated this story, and I sort of am a news junkie, and it's always a news hook. So in 2012, there was a story that broke that was called the Munich Art Hoard. And basically, authorities found in a small, rundown, crappy apartment in Munich, 1,500 masterpieces worth $1.5 billion. And it turns out that the guy who had all these paintings, he was the son of Hitler's art dealer, Hildebrand Gerlit. And so lots of things happened with this story. But when I read that, I literally could feel my blood moving through my body. And I knew this was my story. And that's how the book kind of begins. It's the catapult for all the other characters.
I love that. Thank you. So I kind of think that this is sexy women's fiction and a thriller at the same time. Like, I literally recommended it yesterday to a friend who was in the Watch On bookstore in Montclair, New Jersey, where I grew up. He said, "What? I'm looking for a good thriller." And I was like, "Oh, I have exactly the thriller for you," even though I rarely read thrillers. But I tore through Woman on Fire. Like, I read it in a setting, like you hear people say this, like they are just like there like one like time and just go through the whole thing. And I think it's because I'm curious as to what you think of this comparison. It reminded me a little bit of Sidney Sheldon.
Okay.
Like, I
Personal
love
hero.
reading.
Personal hero. I read all of his books. I mean, every time it was on my parents' shelf, it was in my hands before they got to it. So that is the greatest compliment. I mean, Sidney Sheldon, Howard Fast, and I would have to say Nancy Drew would be my heroines. I mean, I had everyone. They were all organized, completely anal retentive Nancy Drew shelves in my bedroom. So I just kind of love that mix of suspense, sex, history, the whole, gamut.
This book has it all. So I thought this was kind of like updated Sidney Sheldon in that you can't put it downness, and also the twists and turns, but also like a really strong female protagonist. Who Sydney was like a little bit ahead of his time. Like Sydney and Judith Krantz were like introducing us all to like what it was like to be a fiery woman. But I think Sydney was like, his girls were adventurous. And can you talk a little bit about Jules in Woman on Fire? Introduce us to Jules.
So, I was mentioning that I was a journalist for 28 years, and I covered everything from celebrities to covering terrorism in the Middle East, in Jerusalem. And at that time, I was young and fearless, and any story you can throw at me, I was like, yes, I will take it. The more danger, the better. This is before I had kids, before I knew what could happen on the other end, before you become crusty and jaded and old and seasoned, but that time in my life as a writer was just spectacular. It was dangerous, it was fearless, it was exciting. And so this is a long time ago. So when it was COVID, I knew I wanted to write something that I could kind of sit with during this dark lockdown period. And I thought, you know what? I want to go back there. I want to go back to when I was just, that young journalist, and take her on a journey and perhaps give her what I gained, my knowledge now, sort of at the end of her journey. So it was a blast writing Jules, and just to see the mistakes she would make, the left turns, and all those types of things that I did myself.
One of the things that I loved about this book so much was not just the like sort of high stakes cat and mouse game between Jules and her adversary, who I also desperately want to ask you about, but also just Jules's sort of cat and mouse games that she has to play even with her own editor and her own colleagues as a female, like a young female journalist trying to prove herself among like the sort of old boys network. Can you talk a little bit about that? Was that also your experience in the newsroom?
That was 100% my experience, but I wanted to add that I did give her some of my own background story. And so when I was 17 and in high school, I was an intern for the state senate in Springfield, Illinois. And I was approached if I would be willing to be used as bait to break a sex trafficking ring. And, I was like, yes, of course. And so they utilized me and it worked, and we broke a sex trafficking ring. And it was, obviously what really turned me on to journalism and wanting to expose the truth. So I gave that backstory to Jules. And I would have to say, of all the characters I've created, she's the most me. I mean, every character has some of you, as a writer inside of them, but this one has a lot of me. So, there's that for sure.
Just that small, like, I broke a sex trafficking ring thing. I mean, that's what I do when I research my novels also. I'm just like, I'm going to be bait right now, but nobody's actually paying attention. So when I read a book, I always try to figure out as the writer where the puzzle pieces of the author fit into the story. And I would not have guessed that. That is so amazing. And what did your parents think about this? Like, I'm going to like take us a little bit off the woman.
Yeah, sure.
Like, that is so amazing that you did this. Like, was it scary?
They didn't know while it was happening. I was living in Springfield, and I was a very independent, I wouldn't say rebellious, but definitely, was very on my own track and of doing things. In high school, girls weren't at that time very interested in politics and things like that. And I was politics and history. And so they didn't really know until afterward about this story.
And what was the reaction to this?
I mean, it was just another thing that I did. There was a little, off the beaten track for sure.
Oh my God. Okay. Sorry. I told you this was going to be a hot interview. People like, I have to have hearing that. That is so amazing that you did this. Like, we had Hank Flippy Ryan on for her book, A Perfect Life. And of course, Hank is on Crime Time every day, Tuesdays at 4, which is so amazing. And sometimes at 3. And she has done some dangerous-ish, but Lisa, oh my God, that is amazing. And did you ever have a moment as a sex trafficking ring bait person or as a reporter where you felt like you were in danger and maybe thought, I should pull back?
I mean, there were definite moments. I covered some big stories like the famous handshake between Yitzhak Rabin and PLO leader Yasser Arafat and Bill Clinton. And, there were a lot of stories when I was based in Jerusalem that were, terrorism related. So there were moments that I did not feel safe, but you kind of just hold back and you're there on a reporter's mission and you just kind of tune it out and block that and go forward. So yeah, there were definite moments for sure.
So I have a question about this as a Holocaust survivor interviewer. People often ask me, like, do you have PTSD from that? Or like, how did you come down from that emotionally? And I did this all when I was in my early 20s. And so I think I was just so young and like emotionally rubbery that I could do the interview research and then do the interviews and then go home and eat a big dinner and tell people about it. I mean, it wasn't like I didn't ingest the stories, but I didn't stay awake at night, like watching Nazis come out of my ceiling. Like, do you, from your days as a young, fearless reporter, do you ever have any sort of residual emotional residue?
I mean, I'm a very sensitive person. And so I just basically, there was a moment that I was with an American woman in Israel, and her son was captured by terrorists, and he was in the army, and he was an American living in Israel, and they decapitated him. And it was, and I had to interview the mother right after that story. And I literally cried myself to sleep. I cried before I went there. It's emotional sometimes. And, you might have someone that you're dealing with and you go off on a tangent and it's something deep and personal, and you could see the pain in your eyes, and it reflects, and you just, I feel it and I don't hide it, because I think as a writer, as a journalist, you're still human. And, I had a story where I interviewed Leah Rabin right after the assassination in her home. And I had asked her one question, and this very stoic woman who was trying to keep it together for the whole country just broke down crying. So I put my tape recorder aside and we held each other. There was no reporter subject separation. And she cried and I cried. And then we maintained a friendship until her death, which, was probably the most meaningful story of my career. So, I don't believe in being a reporter and being cold. I believe in connecting. And so that's my go-to. And if I cry, I cry. If they cry, I cry. It is what it is,
Yes. Do you have your stories on your website so that our readers, and we are putting up your website in our chat, can we go to your website and see any of these stories, or do we have to Google stalk you?
You probably Google stalk me. A lot of this is my old stuff, but there is a big piece that was in Vogue magazine with Leah Rabin and the whole profile that you probably can find.
Okay, thank you, because I'm going to go and do that. I Google stalk you a lot, and also I follow Lisa on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. Her game is good. Like, seriously, I post something on Instagram, and she's like, "Hi, I just reposted that and made it dazzling," and I'm like, "Okay, you fast." But
I am anal retentive fast. I like to get my stuff done.
You do get your ish done. It is amazing.
I get my stuff done.
That story is phenomenal, and I think that when I was interviewing survivors, we weren't allowed to have questions on camera. I couldn't bring my little legal pad. I had to memorize everything, and we were trained not to respond to really difficult testimony. Like, we were trained to wait and sort of lead survivors through the minefield. But it was true that anytime a survivor cried, I would tear up, and I would have to sit there and just be like, you cannot, like, it is your responsibility to guide this person. Did you have training, or did you feel your way into your reporting through sheer instinct and bravery?
No, I had training. I went to the Medill School of Journalism at Northwestern, and it was really boot camp. I mean, we had to type on a manual typewriter. I mean, back in the day, I feel like it was 100 years ago, but, and in the police car type of reporting. And I really worked my way up. I was in, women's magazines and television. I was 7 years a reporter in Jerusalem, and then to the Sun-Times. So, a lot of it was working my way up, making a mistake, correcting them, giving myself a break, and just going forward. So I still, if it's a hard story, I will bite my lip. I will think of my grandmother, who was my best friend. And I don't know if you know this, but I'm a daughter of a Holocaust survivor. So, and my grandmother, who's a Holocaust survivor, was my absolute best friend and my guiding light. And, I, just would maybe think of her and then just sort of toughen myself up if I felt something really deep and hard like that while I was interviewing.
What was your grandma's name?
Grandma Rachel, and my eldest daughter is Noah Rachel, after my grandmother.
Oh, God, love. And what was the best advice she ever gave you, or just a thing that you always think of her saying?
I mean, it was because of her that they survived the war. She was a small one. She was a fighter, and she had these wild brown eyes, but she always saw the joy in life no matter what. I mean, and the worst thing, she's like, don't worry about it. And she would, she taught me just to, like, fight for things, to stand up for, things that are wrong, to stand up for my Judaism. And, and I don't know why, and I'm sure, we could discuss this for hours, but I'm always gravitating toward World War II, toward those stories. Even when I want to walk away and do something else, I'm pulled right back in. And maybe it's just my connection to her. I think that's what it is. It just keeps me, I hear her, I'm writing, I feel her. It's that kind of connection.
Amazing. I'm mentally bookmarking that about the World War II discussion, because yes, we could go totally into that. But one of the things that I love about Woman on Fire, and every time I say it, the title, the book manifests, that just is the thing that happens, that it does have this very Nazified past, because it's about the repatriation of art and getting it back and finding it and playing this cat and mouse game with it that's so Sheldon-esque and yet based on this foundation of like horrific history. And so it is kind of like history but updated. And so I personally, as a World War II writer and reader, love that. Can you talk a little bit about the villainess in this book, who I loved? I don't know what that says about my little soul, but my fiery little soul. But Margot, please tell us how you came up with this character.
Okay, so Margot de Laurent is a ruthless gallerist, and someone asked me this, and she was totally 100% my favorite character to write, and I was thinking, like, what does that say about me? But maybe it's our dark impulses and we get to put it in fiction there. I think, and I'm sure you can attest to it, that the best evil characters are evil characters that have some strain of sympathy or empathy you could have for them as a reader. So I knew that was important to me. So Margot is, and this is not giving away anything, but she is the one who, robs from the robber, that big treasure trove that I was talking about. And if she was taking all those paintings to do good, that's a different story, but that's not what happened. So she was a pure joy to write. And I'm sure I had like a smile on my face, like an evil smile as I was typing away. But I really gave her a backstory, which there was a lot of pain in her life. She had a lot of loneliness, a lot of rejection. She was the poor little rich girl living in a 50-room mansion and basically, with wild parents who had no interest in her. And so the only thing that mattered to her, her one soft spot in a sociopathic personality, connected to the painting. And so everyone in this book has some connection to this painting. And I think that was the thing for me. I wanted to reflect, as you were discussing before, the 650,000 works of stolen art, art that the Nazis looted or confiscated and destroyed. And I think sometimes when you can narrow it in and maybe focus on one work, that people can understand it and feel what this one painting, Woman on Fire, who's almost like a character in the book, how this, this stolen painting affects so many people and so many lives. And this goes back to people trying to get their family's artwork back, so many years embroiled in legal proceedings.
And the painting really does assume its own character, and it means very deep things to very many people in the book. I have to say, when I was in grad school for writing, our director told us never write about other art forms. Like, we were forbidden from writing about music, about art, about photography, about whatever. And I'm not actually sure why that was, but I think his position was, it's very hard to do, and I don't want to read you sophomoric people trying to do that. I think you write about art so beautifully. Do you have an art background?
So I do not. I know I do not have an art background. I love art. I feel like, this is probably whack jobish, but I feel like I must have been a painter in the 1920s in Paris, sitting at that cafe, and that's because I feel it so deeply. I go back to that time. And I think I chose art. I really, my journalism background came through with that. As I mentioned, 4 years of research on my first book, but I loved it, and I wanted to learn, and I wanted to know, and I wanted to understand and feel it. But I think artists are the most passionate among all, writers. It's all out there. It's all right there on the canvas. And so I'm always a person who just goes after something that is connected to passion, whatever it is. And, so my books are all very different, but the thread of art is in all my work.
Mm-hmm. And if you could paint one kind of painting, because that was not grammatical. If you could paint what kind of painting would you paint? What kind of artist would you be?
It's funny. I always go to Chagall, maybe because of the Jewish themes and the colors and the vibrancy. But I feel like I really love expressionist work because, and Woman on Fire is an expressionist work, which was really important to that time period because Hitler and his posse went after the avant-garde with a vengeance never seen before. It was the anti-Aryan artwork, and it was getting so much play worldwide. And the reason is because expressionism is art that you look at it and it's not the subject, it's how it makes you feel. And so that was just very anti-Nazi, line of thinking. And so I think for me, I for sure would love, expressionist artwork. That's what gets me going for sure.
Do you have like a representation of the woman on fire in your writing studio, or like where you write? Did you have like a mock-up of her?
I actually did. I had this picture that I saw, and it was just this woman, and she's surrounded by flames, and it's, red and golds, and just really exciting picture. So I kind of would glance at her, and she was my mock-up, so to speak.
I wish I had known this beforehand, because I would love to see that. I would just love to see the photo. Where did you get it? Did you make it? Did you have something?
No, like everyone else, I Googled and found I wanted to see various images of women in art. And just as I was going, I stopped and I was like, oh, this is it. This is it, and just one of those moments.
Yeah, it's those moments that make your book real to you, even though, it's coming out of your head and you think, okay, this is kind of feeling real. And then you see that outside representation of what you're working on. And it's just shocking in the best way. Did you post that anywhere so we can see it? Don't make me Google stalk you too much.
No, I will find it. I will send it to you, and maybe I'll put it in the chat. Absolutely.
Oh, we would love that. We would so love. And also, again, everybody follow Lisa on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, because now we will see the woman on fire and the woman on fire and the woman on fire. It's going to be very meta. So I love hearing about authors' processes. And I'm so glad when I guess something and get it right. Like, I knew you had an image somewhere. What else is your writing process like?
I mean, I'm a research geek. I love it. I love deep diving into the research of the period. I like to feel like I'm there. I love the feeling of looking at my desk and it's surrounded by books and real books. And I think, having been a journalist, that it's kind of a blessing and a curse, because, I will, instead of a lot of people, they'll find what they're looking for and they'll say, oh, that's it, makes sense. I have to find 20 things to back the backup to the backup and say, and then it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. That's right. So I will really go hard on the research. Once I have it, I'm sort of this, I know we talk about plotters and pantsers. I'm definitely a hybrid. So I have a loose outline. I know where the book's going to go. And if it's history, that certain elements of history have to be inside of it. So I know that's going to happen. But I also do a big character. So I will take Margot de Laurent, for example, and I will do a whole character composite down to what her scent is. I need to really 5 senses know my character inside and out. So I will have one of those, and then I'll kind of look and see where the characters cross over and meet, and where they, go opposite ways. So once I get in, I will start to write. And I know a lot of writers write ugly, meaning they get one first draft out just to get it down. I do not write ugly. I think it's like my, I guess my anal retentive side, that I like to see each chapter really inform before I can move on. So I will take whatever it is to write that chapter. I'll go back the next day. I'll clean it up. I will also read it aloud. I know we could talk about this, but I read my manuscript aloud to my dog. And I know, Jenna, I know she's sitting right there. And I thought to myself, if she starts barking, you're probably the only interviewer in the world who would not care. So she's right there. So I move through it, and then the characters start to breathe, and the chapters take me, on the journey, and the characters take me. And so that's how it goes. I'm not a fast writer. People can spit out books every year. I'm not one of those people. I wish I had more of that, but I'm a slow, steady writer.
I am too. And Anissa is saying, I love hearing how differently each author writes. And I do too, Anissa. This is why I always ask, because there's no one right or wrong way to do it. But I'm endlessly fascinated by all of my colleagues and how we each do it a tiny bit differently. I also read my manuscripts aloud, but not until the copy edit, like the proofread stage, and not to my dog, because he's like, Leeds, this is so boring. This is so stupid. We could be playing with a ball. So, but I do, because I want to catch errors. So you are, this is fascinating, like a Hemingway writer. So polish
I wish, yes.
I mean, that was how he wrote. He would polish a sentence until he got it right, and only then could he move on to the next sentence. And I used to also be this way. And now I do what I think of. I love the phrase like writing ugly. I think of it as guerrilla writing, as in guerrilla fighter, not like ooh, ooh, guerrilla.
Yeah, totally.
Just to get through a scene, if I hate making a mess. I don't know if you do too. And first drafts are painful to me for this reason. So I'm kind of like get through it as fast as possible. And I write the scenes so quickly from my outline that they look like I've written in Czech or something. Like it's all consonants. Like I have no idea what stuff actually says, but I have the sort of basic shape. So thank you for affirming that. Also, I would like to know, since we have the same agent, what does your agent think about your turning in a book only every few years? Pray tell.
I mean, I think she, Stephanie is the best, and she's French. Here's to you, Stephanie, if you are watching this. She doesn't get on me. It's not, I think she knows that I'm on it. She knows I work 7 days a week, many times 10 hours a day. And I write every day for sure. And I'm very disciplined. So she knows that when she does get it in her hands, it's not going to be a big mess. It's going to be the best I have. And she will make her edits, and I'll go back and I pretty much take in whatever she says and I do it. I'm like, you're the boss, and I get it. But yeah, it doesn't bother her. She doesn't.
So this is where we diverge, because I don't write every day. I write like every 5 years or something. But then, when I hand it in, it is pretty close to being done also.
Yeah.
But she will like chase me around and be like, so Jenna, I feel maybe it is time for you to write something and not just play around on a mighty blaze all the time. And I'm like, going into the tunnel, can't actually hear you. So talk to us about the explosion this book has had. So well deserved, and also must be just like, from the writer perspective, it's what you hope for, but also like shocking, right? It must just be like, oh my God, my book actually is doing the thing that I prayed it would do.
Yeah.
It felt like.
I mean, I think you and I have discussed this before. I am not an overnight sensation. I am a hard-working, day by day author, and I have been writing. I was a journalist by day. I'd work on my fiction at night. I had my first manuscript at 23, and I was first published in my 40s. So you do the math. It's a long time, but I wouldn't give up. This was my dream, and I'm a firm believer, whether it was then or whether I'm 90, I'm still going to fight for that. Doesn't matter. So, it's a lot of sweat equity. But with this book, I felt the energy, and we could talk about how the big Sharon Stone thing happened with this. If you'd like to talk about that.
No, I don't want to hear about Sharon.
I don't want to hear about that.
Sharon Stone, whatever. Sharon Smone.
She's a fantastic woman. She is strong, and she is generous and lovely. So, what happened was I had the ARC, and for those who don't know what the ARC is, it's an advanced reader's copy, which, we could talk about this another time, but it's not the final copy of the book that is sent out. It has mistakes in it. It has things that are going to be fixed, but yeah. And they send it out into the world. So around that time, I had read Sharon's memoir called The Beauty of Living Twice, and I was blown away. Everything, all the things that she fought for, she had a stroke, given 1% chance to live. She just fought, and no one handed her anything. She was that kind of woman, and that's the kind of woman I gravitate toward. I love that kind of fighter person. And so I was blown away by that. And then around the same time, Kristen Harmel, an amazing author, had given me a book blurb. And one of the lines in the blurb was, "Woman on Fire is in Gold meets Spotlight meets Basic Instinct. And so I thought to myself, yes, this is the memoir I'm reading. This is the blurb I got. This is a sign I've got to do something. So I thought, what the hell? I'm going to do this. I'm sure it's like no one's going to even see it. So I found through various sources, her business office, and I just sent her the ARC, thinking nothing of it. So my husband and I were, watching, Netflix, in one of our million binges over COVID. And all of a sudden I get a text that said, "Hi, Lisa, it's Sharon Stone. And wherever she was in Europe. And she said, I am reading your book and I love it. Has it been anyone optioned?" And I'm like, "Optioned? Oh, let me go check with my people," and I was like, oh my God. And, I did the standing on the couch dance and primal scream and, no shame. And I was just blown away. And so very quickly we, connected, signed a contract together. And I had to hold it in for a couple months, which, was hard. And then just a couple weeks ago, we were coming back from Florida and my husband and I were separated. It was a full plane and I'm sitting next to this young woman. The plane lands and the announcement actually had broke while I was on the flight. So I opened my phone and it was like a barrage from all my writer friends, all my people. And I've just like screamed on the plane and like everyone's, "What happened?" So it became a whole plane experience. And the woman next to me, I was like, "Jessica, you don't understand." And I was like crying in her blouse and, mascara stains down her blouse. And, from there, it just really, blew my mind that she connected. And I didn't send it to any other celebrity. It was just like, this is the woman, this is the original Woman on Fire. And it happened. It's crazy, but it happened.
It's Beshert. I feel like this story is like a book in and of itself, and it's such a feel-good story. And I think one thing that we don't always see from the outside is how long things take from the inside. It's kind of like, I watched The Bachelor and The Bachelorette, and I think it's happening in real time, and it's like light coming from a distant star, like maybe sort of a stupid Bachelor star, but there you go. But it's like, you had this announcement and this knowledge for like weeks before you could share it, but we all see it and we're like, it comes out the same week that the book comes out. And we're like, oh my God, what? Like, I mean, that's what I was doing. And also like how much you have fought for your own career as a journalist, and then building that and building your cojones into like sending a text or like sending your book to Sharon Stone. Like, who does that? Even I don't do that. That is amazing. And it helps to be an investigative reporter when you're trying to get Sharon Stone's information. When you first got this text, were you like, I mean, because I know people who've got are like, yeah, Oprah.
Yeah, exactly that. At first I thought it was one of those, total fake texts or someone asking for money from somewhere, and, but then I knew that I had sent this one little, the little arc that could, to Sharon, and that this was real. And, I'm a big believer of, going outside of the box, for writers, go outside of the box. You can't depend on people to make everything work for you. You can have your team, but no one cares about your work the way you do. No one's going to fight for it the way you do. And so, so important to build your author community, to connect with other writers, to do all that legwork, because, this stuff doesn't just come out of the air or, as and how, the Mighty Blaze came to be during COVID, you put this whole thing together to lift authors who were having books come out during COVID. And I think that is the beauty, Jenna. I think this sort of authors lifting each other in this sort of generation of authors is beautiful. And I know I have friends like Erica Roebuck, who had a book coming out. She's amazing, the exact same day as mine. So you could either get in competition mode, or you could say, hey, there's room on the shelf for all of us. Let's just sister up here and be together and promote each other. And it's so much better. It's just so much better.
So, it is better. Sister up, ladies, and in between and whatever. I love that, sister up. We totally should. And I think that in the olden days when I had my first book, which they called The Little Book That Could, because
Absolutely.
like push it up the hill. Um, in the olden days, we didn't have this sort of connection because we didn't have the interwebs as much. So we didn't know how to lift each other up. And now we do. And it's such a blessing. But I do think that, oh my God, this is my, I had to throw this up here because this is our podcast director. Tits up, as Mrs. Maisel would say. This is what I say before every interview, usually. Yes, thank you, Trisha. That is great. And Trisha has her own books plural, coming out next year and the year after. So boom. But it's so nice to have the chance to be able to do this, and yet nobody's ever going to love your book as much as you do. So you got to get out there and shake it. You don't shake it for your book, like don't expect it to go places. Like we talked about your grandmother. My grandfather used to say, Jen, you don't ask, you don't get. So
Absolutely.
ask, right?
Absolutely. 100%.
Yes. And by the way, I would like to point out that Erica Roebuck's book is called Sisters of Night and Fog. So all of you historical fiction World War II people, Sisters of Night and Fog, get it, read it with Woman on Fire, lots of women, lots of elements, night, fog, fire, all amazing stuff. I think that we have time for a couple of reader questions. And one of the ones that I saw from our Twitter director, which I also am curious about, is it hard for you as a former journalist to move from fact to fiction? And what was that pivot like for you? Thank you, Ellen. That was a great question.
No, that is a great question. I think for me, it's really helped me, as a journalist, it's instant gratification, no adjectives. It's who, what, where, when, why, and how, and you get in and you get out. So I think it has really taught me pacing and suspense. You know when the chapter is over, when you have to wrap it up. So I think, and it's also obviously contributed to my research abilities. So I feel like it's helped. Where it hurts is sometimes I research too much and it's like, okay, start writing. It's enough research. This is correct. You can, put it in the book.
I wanted to ask you about that, actually. It's a sausage making thing that I love to know, but I get this question from a lot of readers, and a lot of authors of historical fiction, I think, get this. When do you know it is the time to stop doing the research and just write the story already?
I think when things start to become repetitive. So you're researching and then you're seeing all the same things that you've seen. So there's a moment and you're like, okay, everyone and everywhere I'm going with this is sort of saying the same thing. I think I've got this. It's time, So if there's something that you're researching and there's still some unanswered questions, then you have to keep going. But if the questions are answered, you're good. And you're like, you say to yourself, I'm good. You're done. You're ready to go.
And when do you relinquish your manuscript to Stephanie?
I relinquish it after I do where it's in really good shape. I read it aloud to the dog. My husband takes a look at it. Like the funny thing is he barely reads. This is a guy, I'm married to a guy who barely reads, but he's the best editor I've ever had. Okay. So he can pinpoint a hole, a problem. It's as if it's a neon. So if it passes his evil red pen, then I send it to Stephanie.
Does she know this? She does now.
I think she knows. She knows.
She's like, why does your husband get the book before your agent? I'm just the agent. But
exactly. You sound like her.
She hates it when I do her accent, but I can't help it. And every time I see her, she's like, Jenna, you make me sound like Pepe the Pew. Don't do that anymore. And I'm like, okay,
exactly.
I'm sorry. And then I can't help it. So is your husband your ideal reader, would you say then? Are you reading
it's funny because he will read everything but the sex scenes that I write. He can't handle it. So that's, and especially in my middle book, The Unbreakables, which was very, let's just call it passionate. He couldn't get past it. And, obviously his friends or relatives, but he always says he just doesn't want to know what his mom is reading. He doesn't want to know that his mother is reading that. So he reads everything but the sex scenes.
Do you mark them for him so that he doesn't have to read them? You're like, don't read pages 47 through 58.
Well, it's actually funny because he'll listen to it on Audible, and then it's coming and he's driving. He's trying to, like, at the same time get rid of it and fast forward it, and he can't. And it's actually kind of comical. But no, I do not mark it. I'm very happy for him to stumble on it and deal with it that way.
And be like, ah! People are like, why is that dog driving like that? So funny. I'm actually so glad that you brought this up, because I wanted to ask about the sex scenes, because I want people to know, there is sex in this book. It's sexy. It's some sexy, sexy sex in here. Not just like, it's sex. It like sexy on fire sex. Like, tell us where you get the inspiration for this.
Oh, Jenna. Okay, so I just do want to say one thing about sex scenes. And so people have asked me about it, and I feel like a good sex scene, obviously the technique and things like that have to be, enticing, but a great sex scene moves the story forward. So you get to see your characters really stripped naked and vulnerable. And so in those moments, you get to understand what they're thinking. And a lot of the times it's not about the sex. There's some other things going on. And so for me, a really good sex scene moves the story forward. It's not, just hot. It's got some, real substance to it.
Yeah, it's not gratuitous. It's
not gratuitous. That's the word I was looking for. Exactly. Mm-hmm. And so I enjoy writing them, and it's where do I get my inspiration? I think it's a composite. Let's just say that.
That is such a journalist answer. I have dated many journalists, and I know that, like, you always think you're getting something out of them, and then you don't. Like, you guys know how to elide the question. All right, I won't poke that. I won't probe that much, so to speak, but I might have.
Yeah, exactly here on that line.
Cheers. Yes, I told y'all that you were going to need to have drinks for this interview because it's fiery. But I mean, it is hard to write a good sex scene. There's so many, like, I just can't stop doing double entendres now. It's a gift. But I also think, like, reading them is so rare, and it is a pleasure, and it's unusual. So thank you for giving us that. All right. Blaze says, no probing or poking, just drinking. Okay, I can do that. So audience, if you have questions for Lisa, this would be the time. And obviously she will answer just about anything. So please, like, let us know what you're thinking. This is from Bruce Gilbert. Thank you for joining us. Bruce, are you writing your next? And is it fiction, nonfiction, Nazified, sexified? Like, tell us all the things.
Okay, it's Nazified and sexified. So every time I try to leave World War II, Jenna, like I said, I'm pulled back in. So I was going in another direction, and now I'm working on something. It's about an actress who has a secret past, and it relates to the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising.
Oh my God. Is it Sharon Stone?
No, it is not Sharon Stone. And so it's historical fiction type of book. So I'm working on it. I'm working on it slowly because I was on a roll, but then all the promotion and the book stuff happened. And it's very hard to do both at the same time. So I'm excited about this new book as well.
I am excited about this. And just to, like, go from, like, wow, hot, sexy sex from a minute to, like, something serious, that I interviewed a woman who was a survivor from the Warsaw Ghetto. And she was a child survivor, and she was tiny. So they used to send her under the tunnels that went under the Warsaw Ghetto wall. And she would go out and get food and bring it back in with other child smugglers. And one day I'm just going to tell the story that's going to freak everybody out now. So sorry, but I love the story. So, and this is the kind of caliber of person that Lisa is writing about. So this is like a 6-year-old girl. She was sent out with like a 6-year-old boy, goes under the wall of the ghetto, out into the Aryan territory, comes back with food. And she and the little boy were caught coming back into the ghetto on the ghetto side of the wall. And the soldiers said to them, "What are you carrying?" And they're like, "I'm not carrying anything." And the soldier took out his sword and bayoneted the little boy next to her and said, "If you're not carrying anything, this isn't going to hurt you." Or like he had like meat under his coat, and they like pulled out the knife, but they also killed him, and she ran and survived in the sewer. So, I mean, it was like, this is the kind of thing that I would hear.
Yes. And I think, if you hear the stories of survivors, anyone who's survived, it's extraordinary circumstances. I mean, and think about it. You're talking about a 6-year-old that went under and was, bringing back food. It's just that you had to grow up. There's no childhood. And, that's the hard part. And I think, yeah, these stories, it's just, it's unbelievable. And I think that's the thing. Right now, as you know, that both the Nazis and the survivors, it's dwindling. Not many are left. And, as, getting back to stolen art, you're seeing pretty much on a weekly basis, a major stolen art story in the New York Times. The Louvre is, opening up and revealing that they have these paintings that have been on the walls for, 6, 7 decades or 8 decades almost. And what's happening is what's left of the Holocaust are really the assets. That is what's left. But the assets are not just paintings. They represent, those who had these massive collections or small collections or a singular painting that meant something. It was a life, a culturally rich life that was crushed. And so it's not the art, it's what's going on behind the art. And you're going to see a lot of it because there's now a Supreme Court case wrapped around a stolen piece of art. There's a lot of things happening, and more, which is a good thing. Museums are now kind of coughing up the truth and giving back paintings that have been on their walls. And these are, famous museums and revered museums across the world that are doing this now. So me personally, I'm very happy to see that.
Mm-hmm. I've been thinking the whole time when you were talking about the Nazified background of the books and our concurrent interest in this and a consistent interest. The Japanese have a word for people who interview Hiroshima survivors, and the interviewers are called denshosha, which means transmitter. So the survivors are dying off because they're old, and the only people who are left to speak are the denshosha, or the transmitters. They have to transmit that memory. Do you feel like you have a moral obligation in some ways as a writer to keep returning to this time period?
First of all, that just, if you could see my arms, all the goosebumps, that's exactly how I feel. I feel like, especially now with the surge of anti-Semitism, it's so important to stand up, so important to tell these stories. I mean, you see the leader of Ukraine. I'm so proud, but also proud as a Jew. He reminds me of a Maccabee just standing up, and he comes from, Holocaust survivors, and he is just not backing down. And I every time I see him, I just am filled with pride and admiration and hope and prayers. But yes, it's like, yes, I think it's so important to transmit these stories. And I think, people, there's a lot of World War II, aficionados who really want to read this time period. And it's not necessarily, Jewish people, it's people from every different background. And I think, which is amazing and important. And so I feel with this, my book is kind of a mutt. It's history, it's suspense, it's, all these things. But what I do want most of all is the takeaway, kind of the goodie bag or the toolkit, that people are going to learn something through osmosis, through a story, that keeps you wanting to read to the next chapter. But you're going to walk away with knowledge, and that's important. And that's the transmitter that you're talking about. Exactly.
Totally. And so much, as Debbie said, so much hope and respect. And hopefully people feel inspired by the stories as well. Like, it's my turn to goosebump up when you were talking about Zelensky. I just thought, every time I see him, who's an ordinary family guy and an actor who became an inspiration, I just want to go make a Molotov cocktail. I do. Like, I want to get over there and fight, because the people who are fighting are ordinary people, and God bless them. Like, seriously, God bless them. And thank you for bringing that up. So we have time maybe for like one more question. And Bob wants to know if we would ever do a book together. Would you ever co-author with anybody?
I mean, someone like you, 100%. I mean, with your brilliance and this is before anything. I love your work. I've loved all of your writing. It's moving, and all the things that I look for in a writer. So, yes, I would absolutely consider it.
Oh, that would be great because you could do all the research and also all the writing, and then I could just, have
Oh, no. Yeah,
opinions or
that'll be a
something.
combo.
Yeah. All right. All right. We'll work out the schedules. I think it would be interesting. I never actually have written with another writer, but I think the more I do Blaze, the more I'm like, oh, I actually like people and I really love other writers. So I think it would be sort of an interesting thing. Anissa says, can you imagine the writing sessions between these two? If you get anything done, you would totally have
Yeah,
to whip on me.
I know. We'd have a good bottle of wine between us as we type away, for sure.
I think that would be fun. It would definitely be a sexy, sexy time book with lots of Nazis in it, and hopefully, like, really, yes, Ellen knows me. She's like, imagine the sex scenes from this. All right, maybe we'll just write like, I don't know, historical sexy time. But all right, deviating. Have to have another drink. And I know that Erica Roebuck is with us today. We were just talking about her book, The Sisters of Night and Fog, and you guys have reading together with Friends in Fiction, who we love here at Blaze. They're like one of our sister organizations, lifting authors. Can you tell us about your promotion for Woman on Fire and like how this has sort of changed your life since the Sharon Stone option, since the Barnes and Noble pick? You're on Good Morning America. Like, tell us about your promotion and your upcoming events, please.
Yes. So I have a promotion that has probably been my most favorite thing to do, and it's called Carpool Karaoke, CRE. So it started off with kind of just feeling out a few authors, and then it turned into, I have 62 authors on board, and each week I say, I'm Lisa Barr, the author of Woman on Fire. What does it take to become a woman on fire? And basically, it's asking authors to tap into their younger self and what would be the one thing they would tell their younger self if they could. And it's really giving back to Generation Z, basically, and trying to, because my main character is a 24-year-old. And so it has been wildly beautiful and touching. And all the authors are in their car, kind of like, carpool karaoke, and just giving their own little spiel and going back deep. And it's been a joy to do that every Wednesday. So I've been doing that. Lots of book events. I mean, I've got 24 this month, and including Zoom and not including book clubs. And I'm literally, my husband's like, am I going to see you? I am doing some travel. I'll be at Books and Books in Miami and Coral Gables. I'll be at the Tattered Cover in Aspen Grove. I'm doing some very special events with the Holocaust Museum here, something at the New York Museum with the Jewish Book Council, who's, I know you're a huge fan. I was on book tour. I know we love you. I was, pretty much almost 3 years with Fugitive Colors, my first book with the Jewish Book Council, which is just an amazing platform for authors. And a lot of stuff, a lot of different things going on, various synagogues and, women's groups. And so it's going to be busy, and I'm excited. And, honestly, I love the book clubs, kind of the intimate discussions and, lots of Facebook Live and Insta Live types of things. So
good. So you're mixing it up. You're doing live events and Zoom
oh,
events.
yeah.
All the people, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm a people person, and I'm a hugger too, so it's hard to be Zoom and virtual, but it's a good thing to reach a lot of people, and so I welcome that platform, but I love in person, up close and personal events, no question.
Same. I'm like having a hard time. Like, I don't get to reach through and hug you like I would like to. And my hands are like giant, like coming to hug you, but it's tough. It will surprise nobody that I am the same way. Like, I love the in-person. I love the Zoom. Like, the more connection, the better. Bring it. And ask Lisa to join your book club. If you are watching, she will come, or invite her to your home or your synagogue or your event. She will come because she is a woman on fire. So Lisa, one last question.
Yes.
And I remembered while you were talking that I owe you a carpool karaoke, which you asked me for.
I didn't want to bring it up, but no, you were on tour. You were on tour with your book. I mean, when you're on tour, it's crazy town. So
time. But
But
I was like, we're in my car, so I'm like, I can totally do this, and then I would be driving, and then
yeah,
but I will get you a carpool
it's
karaoke.
it's a year-long gig. So jump in, whenever, yeah, it's a year-long thing. So, whenever you're in your car and you're just, stick on the phone and send it over.
I totally will, because I'm just gonna get in my car like after I do this and be like, yo, younger self, like it's okay to eat nachos. Like it's fine.
Oh, 100%.
Right? Eat the nachos. Life is short. So
Nachos.
eat the nachos. So my question is, like, what advice would you give your younger self?
Well, my advice was, you know, never take no for an answer. If there's a door closed, you go through the window. And like I said to you at the beginning, always follow your passion. It's going to lead you in the right direction. And at the end of the day, even if you have a day job and, there's realistic components to following your passion, but find a way to do it at night. Whatever it is that you can find that stolen time to follow your passion, you go for it. And that's what you should do. So never take, I tell my girls, I have 3 daughters, and I say, don't take no for an answer. There's always a solution out there. So that's my advice for my younger self. Oh, one more piece of advice. If you're a young author or journalist, always have backup. I have been in situations where my high-tech, amazing recorder did not work. And then my crappy little Magnavox, recorder from high school saved the day. So backup your backup. That's what I would say.
Love it. Don't take no for an answer. Literal goosebumps, and back up your back up your backup, and also like drink more gin so that you don't get a frog in your throat.
Oh, 100%.
Cheers, my friend. You are legit a woman on fire. We are so to have talked with you. Please take care of yourself out there. We know you're going to tear it up. We'll all be watching, and we'll all be cheering.
Thank you, Jenna. I just want to say you're the best, and thank you, being an author, for always lifting other authors, and what you do in the book world is so appreciated. And thank you. Thank you for having me here.
You are so welcome. And everybody go out and buy at least 15 copies of Woman on Fire and give them to every woman on fire you know. And there are a lot of us out there, and they will be grateful. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for Friday Frontliner today. Take care of yourselves. Be well. Read well. Bye.
Bye.